focus is getting students to and through college. So we look at the APs. If there is a subject area that students will be taking in that line, such as English, such as such as social studies, we look at the skills necessary for them to be successful in those as part of the process of building up curriculum. So, what you'll notice is that most of these that you've been looking at have a similar outline and frame that students are working on, or teachers have been working on. Teachers do unit planning. A unit can go anywhere from 1 or 2 weeks to 6 weeks or a quarter. It just depends on how teachers are kind of lumping things together, right? And so some teachers really like to have short units because they feel like it fits really well with that. And some would have a longer unit. It doesn't mean that what they're covering is different. It's just how they're kind of thematically lumping things together. So you'll notice if you were to go here, the very first one is Miss Trivets, and I've passed out a bunch of them, but they're kind of around here. So Miss Trivet, her first part of it here, every one of these has real-world applications, and so the way that Miss Trivet's unit plans kind of work, they're a little bit smaller because she wants to be able to dig into one thing very specifically. And she has that within algebra and geometry and has that part of it. But whereas an English one or a theology unit may be 9 weeks. It can easily fit in that because you may be reading a book. And it's just not realistic to get through a book in that amount of days, right? And so it just depends on the subject area and kind of how we are going about that. So within that, what you then in turn see is some changes. Now, from a scope and sequence, meaning when I'm defining words, our scope, what do we talk about? What are the skills you're going to be focusing on in 9th grade English versus 10th grade English versus 11th grade English versus 12th grade English? So not only are we backwards planning from what students need to be at by the end of this school year in June, but we have to think about where they're going to be as sophomores, juniors, and seniors to be successful. And we know that also if we have a gap in skills in 9th grade, that could affect sophomores, juniors, and seniors being successful across the board. There are other things to notice about, just from different subject areas. History, the social studies classes, it's Oklahoma history, it's world history, it's U.S. history, it's government. There's not a real overlap of subject areas. You're not going to get a ton that Oklahoma, like there's going to be some things that you're going to note, like, hey, we talked about the Civil War, it happened there too. There's not a huge amount of overlap. Whereas in math, that sequence really, really matters. If you miss a chunk of math, you're going to have trouble with that next chunk of math. So that's why we think about that. Sciences, there are skills, but see, the big part of that then in turn is that overall, there are really 2 things that teachers really focus on. Content. Are the students receiving content that is that's appropriate for them to be having at that grade level? But the other part of it that's really important, probably honestly more important in some ways, is are they getting the skills that they need to have for that grade level? And so we talked a little bit about writing and reading, focusing on the social studies skills, English skills. Those are things that are really important for them to be successful in those AP classes we were talking about shortly ago. And so because we want that to be part of the case, it's very intensively layered into everything that we do, and it's been thoughtful about that. So the way that I envision this night going is that, and then we can make adjustments as you would like to do so. But I would love this, what we have here is really the start of the second semester and the majority and some of the unit plans for this semester. So not first semester and not all of second semester, but we can talk about just overall generally kind of where we're at. And this is the unit plans that teachers have submitted and that we are preparing to go over, or that students are going over as we speak. And that's kind of where we're at. Students as freshmen take either algebra or geometry. If they took algebra as middle schoolers, almost all of those students are in geometry this year. There are a couple of students who have found themselves either wanting to retake Algebra 1 or feeling like we needed to, but for the most part, we have 4 sections of algebra and we have 2 sections of geometry at Cristo Rey as our 9th grade this year. That's really not a student's fault. There are a lot of schools that, and it doesn't say that they're any higher or lower, in all honesty. It means that they're 1 year ahead if they're in geometry, but the reality is that a lot of middle schools don't offer algebra as an option as 8th graders. So you could be the smartest kid in the world in 8th grade, and if you didn't take algebra, you didn't have that option, then you're in algebra this year. And so we have some really high students that are in algebra this year, and we have some really high students that are in geometry. Likewise, we have some students that are struggling with algebra, and we have some students that are struggling in geometry. So it's just kind of how that works. So within our unit plans, and within this part of it, every unit has multiple portions. And this unit concept comes from, it's how we think about the big picture of what we're doing. And so every one of our teachers is asked to think about, how does this relate back to the real world? And so in algebra, in geometry, they may be talking about the sciences or STEM. They may be talking about overlapping with the oil industry. Or they may be talking about, it's legitimately a ton of different directions with that. Underneath that, you have questions. What is basically the big question for this, or what's the big statement of inquiry? What are the things that we want students to be thinking about as they go through this entirety of this time? And underneath that, you have factual questions, meaning like, what are kind of the very obvious things that we want students to learn? What are big concepts that we want students to learn about that? And then underneath that, what are some debatable questions that we want? So basically, oftentimes, students find the factual questions to be kind of boring, or statements, because it's just facts. You get down to the other side of this and debatable stuff, and kids like to debate at this age. And so you want to be able to put a mixture of things that are going on so that students are really doing a little bit of everything. As you go through the unit plan and you begin thinking about that, underneath that, you have in all of these areas is what are the students, so underneath there are essential understandings. By the end of this unit, what should students be able to learn? Where should they be at if they're going to get 100 on this unit, if you will? All the students will know how to do these things. Do we fully and truly expect that every student will learn every single thing every single day? No, that's part of this is teaching kids like everybody else. I'll read a book, and how much do I get out of it? Sometimes I get all of it, sometimes I don't get all of it. And so that's kind of the route. We want to make sure that we understand where kids are at, and these are the things that we're judging students at. And that's where an A comes from, or a B comes from, or a C comes from. I really don't look at it as a negative or a positive. I look at it as a means of seeing for ourselves what support are we giving. If a student has a B, then there are specific things that we need to be working on to help that student get better. If a student has a C, then we know that we have specific areas. And all of those grades, every grade that you're going to put into and that we put into gradebook is something that allows us to know what is something that we need to be working with that kid, with that student on. And so that's kind of with that. Below that, you have vocabulary, and then knowledge and skills. Just varieties of that. And that happens across the board, whether it's English, math, science, or social studies. And then, as we start going into that, interdisciplinary connections. What that means is that we want our teachers and our students to be connecting different subject areas across the board. Social studies doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not by itself. English and social studies overlaps. Science and math, it overlaps. Theology and English overlaps. And so how are we connecting those things with each other so that students are able to begin making real world connections, back to that, but also interdisciplinary connections. And so we want them to be able to do that. We also begin thinking about how are we evaluating all of our students. And so every one of these will have an area that talks about that. And then below that, we begin thinking about how are we differentiating for students. Not every student learns the same way. Some students are auditory learners. Some students are tactile learners. They really need to have their hands on something. Some students like to talk about stuff. They like to debate things. That's what they like to do. We try to be thoughtful about that. We have students that are in different places. Some students walked in and know exactly how to write a great 9th, 10th, 11th grade essay. Some students are trying to figure out their voice and try to find that voice. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to get there. It's a place that they're going to grow with. And so differentiation matters with that. And then below that, we begin looking at every single day of a unit. And so you'll notice within these, day 0 to day 1, within this math one, there are day 1, day 0, day 1, day 2, quiz, day 3, 4, 5, another quiz, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Quiz, things at the end. 15 days of instruction is obviously more than 15 days of just of a calendar year. So with our students who obviously go off to work at least once a week, we have a really unique setting in which we have a situation where students have 4 days of instruction, and that students, even in the same day, there are classes that are coming in that are on day 1 of instruction, and then there are classes that are on day 2 of instruction. And as you go through the week of that, it's kind of a mixture of where everyone's getting caught up. We're all going to have the same amount of days of instruction, but it takes a while to get there. And so that's kind of how that works. So as she goes through, the very bottom of this, Ms. Trivet will have reflections, and she has things that she wants to think about. Describe the planning process, what are things that she's doing, and then she'll reflect on how the unit went. So we don't go into even as we go 15 years from now, you're going to be able to teachers will be able to pull different things that they've done, but we don't believe that it's good instruction to say it's day 100 of days of instruction. I can pull something out, and this is what we do every year on day 100. Because our students are going to be different every year, and we may know the direction of things that we're reading, or we may know the direction of things that we are working on, but every student is different, and every group of students responds differently. And so what we want from teachers is to be doing things and activities, evaluating students along the way. That's why you showed multiple quizzes there. How are students doing? So that we're not going 9 weeks into a unit, get to a test at the end of it and go, well, they didn't get that, did they? And then what do? We want to know whether or not they're with you that day, so that adjustments can be made the next day and how we're looking at that. So when you do unit plans, we know from a scope and sequence perspective where we're going big picture, but we can't tell you on a day 101 exactly where we'll be at day 109 where we'll exactly be, because we want them to be shifting and making changes. Now, they still have to get through everything, and so there has to be adjustments that get made with that. That is best practice with educators. That is what is happening at the schools that are being most responsive to student needs and helping students grow the best. So when I was at the last school I was at, in Uplift in Dallas, we were able to grow students at about 2.5 grade levels per year. And we did that by being responsive to student needs on a daily basis and being very thoughtful about where kids are at so that we can make adjustments to that. It doesn't change the curriculum, but it may change the pace at which we're doing it, or it may change the way in which we're approaching it. So the activities may change, but the activities may change between first period and third period based on what those students are. Because our first period class may be, we may have 22 kids in that class, and all of them love to chat all day long, and so we need to put them in a place where they're going to be more chatty and they're going to be able to work through something. You may get to the third period and you cannot pry a word out of that group of kids. And so they're a group that likes to put their head down and work and do it that way. And so we're going to make adjustments around what that is. Or you may have a group of kids who really like to get their hands on something, and we need to figure out what that looks like. And so that's kind of what you're looking at and what you're doing. So in what you have in front of you, every one of these is where we're at for right now for algebra, geometry, that's Miss Tribbett. You have the last, the December unit plan for Miss Abby in English. The conversation that we had in December, the end of December, that unit plan is what that comes from. And then you have her next unit plan, the one that we're currently on and what we're currently working on. You have, no, I'm sorry.
It's upcoming.
That we're getting to, we're about to get to, sorry. We have English, math, science. You have a year-long plan for science and what the scope and sequence is for that and where we're kind of at. We have social studies and the unit that is here and the forthcoming, as well as books that we're getting ready to read along the way for those. We have theology, what the scope and sequence looks like for the remainder of this year, and what that is and what we're happening with that. We have English, math, science, social studies. That's close to my head, like where I'm at. Science, social studies, theology, Spanish. You have this. We have this unit for Spanish, and where we're going with that. We have the year-long scope and sequence for Startup Tech, your technology class, and Ms. Medsel teaches. And hers really is done by a day-to-day process, and it is 100 and something days of instruction. But you can see kind of every bit of that. She makes slight adjustments as she goes along, but that is coming from a national network curriculum, and so we're following that pretty closely to a T. And then we are thinking about who else am I missing? Theology, technology, social studies, math, science, social studies. Yeah. So I think that is it. And then as far as advisory, I can talk through that with you. We, this quarter, are doing goal setting, and students are working on SMART goals, writing specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and timely goals. Kind of think of it as a new year. What are your New Year's resolutions, right? And so we're working with students to look at their specific grades. We're working on their specific demerits or their specific areas that they want to work on, and then helping them write a specific and measurable way of improving that. And then advisors are helping them to follow up by having conversations with them and checking in on that data. So I think probably not much controversy there at all. But that's what that part of this quarter will be focused on. And we'll be checking in with that. And there will be one lesson as we prep for Martin Luther King Day on our day of service. Ms. Bass has asked for us to add in a day where we're working on just making sure the kids know some basic outlines and some things that we'll be working on, as well as just know why service is important for us for a day that is focused on Dr. King. So that's that kind of overall picture. I can legitimately go through every line item of these. I can give us reading time. I can let us talk about individual things if you have questions about them, or I can do a little bit of all of those things. So I'll stop talking for a moment and listen.
I do have a question on the final. There's a class that took a final in a group. I was not too pleased with that. I don't think a group setting or a final should judge my daughter's grade.
Okay.
I know what my daughter is capable of, not that the other students weren't.
Sure.
And to be honest with you, I don't know who the other students were.
Sure.
Is that going to happen again?
So when we do performance tasks, areas that students are doing in groups or that students are still being individually judged by that. So they have individual portions that they're doing within that, and they're still getting that in most classes unless there's something I'm not aware of. And so I would like to, do Do you know, what, if you don't mind just telling what class it is? And
It's upstairs, for volleyball coach.
it's in science, and so they did individual,
Physics.
in physics they were doing a lab, and so the reality is that labs are going to take place from here until the seniors in college, and there's really only one way to do that. Now, they're still doing individual work and lab reports with that, and so their individual lab reports do have a factor within that. And so students are working within, in groups and are working with each other, but those lab reports have the vast majority of the grade for that situation.
So, for me to find out what is the grade for that final, or what the average is, I have to talk to the teacher, right?
I can also look that up and be happy to talk to you.
Okay. Yeah, because I want to know.
Okay.
You know, because like I said before, you know, to depend on someone else in my daughter's grade.
Yeah.
You know.
There is, I will tell you, like, it is a pretty normal thing that students are going to find themselves in those kinds of situations. I have a doctoral program that I'm in right now that I had to do a number of group activities as well. And so it is, building those skills is also an important part of what we do.
It is, I just know, I know how hard she works.
Sure.
And, you know, some of the problems that, you know, some of the other students were not, you know, 100%. It's just not fair.
I understand. So if you have those kind of individual situations or conversations, let's talk in the future about those and then work our way through those. So I think there are always going to be 100 specific situations that occur through the year, and we're always happy to talk about those.
Just to clarify what he was saying, was that a final that you're referring to that was done as a group?
Yeah.
So was physics lab done as a group
The physics
for
lab
the final?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There were two parts to it. So there was a part that was individual, that was kind of a typical assessment, which is an open response portion, and then there was a second part that was the lab. But then also as part of their score, the students got to kind of rate one another and how they worked together, and really like had the opportunity to write if they felt like this person was being very lazy. So, and that was kind of factored into their score as well. Obviously, I didn't grade them, so
Yeah,
right.
My daughter's not going to bat anybody in.
No.
Yeah,
That's not her attitude.
Because my daughter talked about the rating each other, and she was told that one of her group mates said, if I get a bad score and I find out who did it, I'm gonna give you a bad score.
Good.
And that was done, and she got retribution for it.
Okay.
I understand. So in a final situation, these performance tasks were designed to be a less stressful version of an exam. Sitting down, we are trying to move away from a place where all that students ever get assessed on is an A, B, C version of their life. And I don't think that it's the most realistic version of determining whether students really do get that. Every final, every performance task that was designed and put into that place had an individualized component of it. There may have been a couple of places like physics where there was a group component as well, but it really was designed to be able to take an individual's situation and figure out how well they specifically did as well. Yeah.
In her defense, I've taken, tests in the group with class and in high school, but never a final.
Sure.
So
Right.
that's why I
Right.
asked
Yeah.
why it was in the group setting, and especially at final.
Yeah. So as we saw, we sat down with that. I worked with that, and then also we have a former science teacher that's on staff as well, and we worked through these pieces of that. That was the thought process behind it. It was trying to make sure that it was something that we're not sitting down and doing 95 questions of multiple choice. And we thought that students would really do better in that setting, honestly, than sitting down and taking a multiple choice test. So that was the thought process behind it. If you want to talk about Miranda's individual situation, I'm happy to discuss it there. Would it be good to have some reading time? And then I also am happy to scan these documents and put them on. and I can stand and wait here for a while and read through this, and then I can have individual conversations with people as well, or I can have answer individual questions now as well as we go through.
I also want to offer one more resource.
Yeah.
In several classes, the students are going to be using a digital notebook. I don't know if you're familiar with Microsoft Office and OneNote. There's the potential to share that whole notebook with you as parents. So on this sign-in sheet for tonight, I updated that to include just a column for your name, a column for your student's name, and then the very last column is just if you want to be added to your child's OneNote notebook. You might get several invitations because they have different notebooks for each class. But you can see, so in Oklahoma history, they'll be using it to kind of, you can see the articles they'll be reading in class. You can see any homework that they're assigned so that you can be kind of more aware of exactly what it is that your student is doing. So I'll pass the sign-in sheet around just so that you can kind of opt in to being part of that notebook.
In Oklahoma history right now, we just to give an update on that at the moment as well. We are still looking for a long-term teacher within that, and administration, myself, and Ms. Dix are in those classes at the moment as we do that until we find that permanent person. I'm hoping to bring in people to interview as soon as we find the right folks for that. And we hope to find someone that will be here this school year. So I can't make that promise because if that person doesn't present themselves, and I refuse to put a person that is not going to be good for our students in that place. And we'll continue to make sure that we are providing that support. Oklahoma history is an important class, and social studies is a really important subject area at the high school level. I think a lot in middle schools and elementary schools, I think sometimes science and social studies gets kind of set aside as not being as important, and English and math get all the attention. And as much as Ms. Abby is sitting here, may want to sway me on this, I actually think that social studies is as important, maybe even more important for some students as they look into their future. The reality is that social studies is the class that they will have the most opportunities to take advanced placement, those AP courses. Compared to English, there are 2 English opportunities. There are 3 AP opportunities that students will have. The majority of students in this country are in colleges, are in the College of Liberal Arts. And liberal arts being government, sociology, psychology, history, political science, that kind of direction. There are more students in that college than all the other ones combined, actually, in this country. And even if you go towards an engineering direction, or a math direction, or a computer science direction, there is a very, very high likelihood that you will take a history class, or a government class, or an English class in your time as college students. And so I believe that it's really important that our social studies classes are at incredibly high rigor and should be at the same rigor level as our math and our science, and English classes. And so it's really important for us to make sure we're doing that. I taught AP U.S. history, I taught AP government, I taught world history, and so I'm prepared to make sure that students are receiving what they need to be successful, to be in those classes and do well.
Are you the one that's teaching the class right now?
I'm teaching half today, and Ms. Dix is teaching half today. So that way they'll be able to do that. I hope to find the honest truth is, I hope we find the exact person next week. I will keep you all updated with that. I have not reached out to parents about being part of an interview because we're not ready to have those interview processes yet with those teachers. So with a teacher within that, I just don't. That person has not presented themselves yet.
So whenever taking into consideration like further finals or testing, whatever, you guys will be working together in order to. So
I will teach. Yes, we're doing the same curriculum. I teach the same 3 classes every day. Ms. Dix will teach the same 3 classes every day. So there's consistency there. So it's not flipping back and forth. Yeah. And the honest truth is, the other reality, if it's ever going to happen, where one of the 2 of us needs to step in to teach a class, year 1 when we have 115, 120 kids, versus year 4 when we have 450 kids, this is the year for that to happen and for us to be able to do this. And so we both have experience teaching, and we'll be happy to step in and make that work.
Current
So.
ELA and Oklahoma history. So the other one that we had was for last 9 weeks. Yeah.
The one that is it for every class or is it specific to?
Oh, so Oklahoma history and English are using
Yeah, because that's not okay.
and we are piloting that and hoping that other teachers will pick it up. So that also allows, so within the Oklahoma history OneNote, students were able to take their notes in there, they're able to move over homework and do it there. They're able to move over their classwork. In their class resources document, they'll be able to pull up the PowerPoints that we've had from the previous day, so that the students can go back and look at that, as well as the resource documents, the readings that they're doing, and anything that we, along the way, that we just need to hand out, those kinds of things. Miss Abby, what are you using the limit for? Generally the same thing?
For
Or?
the research paper for them to digitally collect their resources so that they can, one, not lose it and then annotate it on there. And then they're also going to submit all their sources along with every.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your upcoming unit while you're here? Sure.
Okay, so the upcoming unit, we pulled up the,
Yeah, I can.
the red book.
The one that I'm sitting on, textbook? Yeah.
Yes, so that's going to be our mentor text, and so that's actually about the deposition of the Shah in Iran, and it's actually shown through a graphic novel interface for students, so I'm hoping they're going to be excited about that. It's won a ton of awards, it's got a lot of listings, so it's really well known. Thematically, we're thinking through dominant narratives, so who tells what stories, how does that interact with like power dynamics, and thinking about how does telling a story actually affect how we perceive that. And so it's interesting, in this story, I had a student just outside, he just picked it up, and he said, oh, this says like something not about capitalism. It's like, yes, because it's actually talking about it from a communist perspective, right? So communism like, fundamentally doesn't believe that capitalism is the right way to govern, and yet if we were thinking about it from our perspective, that's not something that most Americans would say. We would always like advocate for capitalism. And so we're thinking through how does that function in a variety of different cultures, and so this will be interesting because this should be a culture that most of us don't have experience with, and so we're also thinking about that. We're going to be doing a blog and a podcast along with that. Hopefully, so we figure out all the technology, how everything works, looking at point of view, collecting textual evidence, and then pushing into a deeper level of analysis, which is what a lot of students are missing. And so we'll have like more of a little seminar about how do I collect evidence, and then how do I continue my own analysis into that, giving a little bit more agency to that process with the blog and podcast. Does anyone have anything? I think
Start with stock, we're getting over here.
And so you can see that I think I included that in that packet. It's not completely done that unit. It'll be a while because we're still going to finish our research papers before that, so that's going to be an undertaking for all of us.
And what is the research paper about, Ms. Abby?
So they get to pick a social issue. We brainstormed, so again, that was the theme of the unit, and we brainstormed some yesterday. They had so many great ideas. A lot of them that are going to the trip to DC actually wanted to use a portion as theirs, and so they're going to be collecting some interviews. As part of that project, I'm really excited to see kind of what they come up with. And they'll be gathering articles. Right now we're going over how to strategically read an article. For some of the kid parents, you kind of thought about that before, like how do I decode a text? We're taking that kind of to a new level. Because again, in high school and especially in college, they'll have a variety of texts. And how do I make meaning of all these different things? And it's synthesize and put them together. And so it'll be about a social issue of their choosing. We're going to be pulling sources from a variety of places. I have a couple of articles up there that some students might use: Time, New York Times, Newsella, all really well-known sources, and so we'll be pulling from a lot of those different sources. Yes.
Now, does each child get to pick their social issue, or they're okay?
So they get to pick their, they told them, pick something you're interested in. I've been giving them feedback about how to narrow down your topic. But they're all over the board from pollution, we've got some of that, we've got people talking about abortion. It's really going to be an interesting for me to read too.
In Oklahoma history, we are at this moment really we have a small unit, about a 3-week unit, that students are going to be working on a variety of things. We've gotten the statehood, we've established Oklahoma as a state, and now we are settling the state, right? We're looking at that, and so we are really focusing on kind of 3 unique areas. One is we'll revisit where Native Americans are and how that settlement process happened. We'll talk about the influx of historically African American towns in Oklahoma, and some of the really interesting things that happen with that. And we will be focusing on the oil boom and how oil affects Oklahoma and what really goes with that. And so students will, in this unit, in the week of January 21st to 25th, that week, with a presentation that will be focused on either economic activities that are existing at that time, or focusing on a historically black town that has been in Oklahoma that either still exists, like Langston, or towns that have come and gone that are grown out of that. And so that's a focus that's helping us talk from post-Civil War, Reconstruction, and then how Oklahoma coming around about that time allowed for some really interesting settlement patterns to happen. So Oklahoma, because it opened up in 1889, and because you had a lot so we had fought the Civil War. The Civil War was won by the North. You have African Americans who have gone from slavery in the South to being freedmen, but who really, truly, in most places in Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, don't truly have freedom. We have places like Kansas where there's been an attempt to move, for some families to be able to move to, and to have more freedom, and did not have a ton of success. And there's an attempt to bring in and to actually make Oklahoma a place where rights are available for families and for African Americans, and where they can have land ownership. And there's a real attempt from the 1890s until up and through this. The next step for us, our next unit, which will be focused on Dreamland Burning, which is a novel that really looks at Tulsa and the rise of the financial district in Tulsa. That's an African American centric Wall Street, and then the race riots that happened because of that. And so this goes along with our social studies Oklahoma history standards in the state of Oklahoma, and focusing on that area. This novel, it's a novel, so it's nonfiction, but it's looking at fiction. It's fiction looking at obviously nonfiction things that happen. And so we'll be bringing in readings that are primary sources and secondary sources talking about these areas. I've been reading the majority of this and working through this, and I think students are really going to like this. We won't start this until either right at the end of January or right at the beginning of February, and so we obviously have a large number of these available, and so we do need them back before that time, but if someone would like to read the book ahead of time and would like to do that, I'm happy to pass out copies of that this evening as well, just to be able to have you have a chance to take a look at it. It looks big, it's an easy read, and it's a really, I think, a pretty solid book. So feel free to take it with you. If you want to come, if you'd like to get one, I just want to make sure that I sign those out to you guys. I'm getting a lot of head shakes now, but okay. Anyone who would like to, in science, we've gone through energy, and we've gone through motion. We've gone through motion and Newton's laws. We've talked a lot about graphing, and we will go into the next semester. We will really be focusing on energy and waves, and we'll be bringing a little bit of integrated physics and earth science into this. So you'll get a little bit of astronomy, and the stars and the earth and how that affects some of the things that go along with that. So a little small section of that. But we'll be talking about energy, and energy is always an interesting time because Be careful what your kids might be creating and bringing home, because you might get a shock. So just be careful that you don't grab hold of anything in the next few months. So from your students. In theology, the theology is the very last one here. So second semester with that, Mr. Beach is focusing on. So Unit 4 for him is God meets human need in Jesus Christ, biblical and theological introduction to Jesus Christ. So getting to see Jesus as fully human and divine, understanding the paradox of faith and the paradox of the incarnation of Jesus. Kierkegaard's fear and trembling of philosophical fragments. Dostoevsky's on Christ and temptation of our culture. Understanding how the law and prophets connect to Jesus. God guiding us in having love for the most forgotten in society. The Beatitudes in Matthew 25. Mother Teresa's response to the love for the poor. Suffering servant of Isaiah. David in the Psalms. So, just not a whole lot going there. So, Mr. Beach has a Jesuit training. He went through and has more hours of school than I would like to than I would ever like to be part of school. But he was on the training to become a Jesuit, and so for choosing to getting married and to do that, so he was going to be a Jesuit priest. And so when they happened, he has 2 masters, and then he started 3 other ones purposely that they knew that they were going to do that, so theology and divination and a variety of things, as well as the last part of it. And so there are some times when he gets into things and gets really excited about stuff that I'm really excited that he's excited about them, but the Chesky may not be my part of it, but that's kind of what he really will make it great for kids, so I promise that. Unit 5 is Jesus is God with us in human form, giving us the way to love. So understanding the commandment of love, how the 10 commandments are guided by personal love for God and neighbor in Christ's love, in Jesus' presence, actions, and words, the rich young man, Good Samaritan, the parables and miracles. And then Unit 6 is the church as the body of Christ, living our faith. So our call to holiness in faith, church, communally and individually, the sacraments, and then the communion of saints. And so that's what students will get this year, which does follow the National Catholic Education, the bishop's curriculum. So the bishops and the archbishops come together every so often and create guidelines for what students should be learning about in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. And so if you were to pick up here and go to Mount St. Mary's or Bishop McGinnis, kind of talking about that, right? We might teach it differently from like how activity-wise we're doing it, and it may be somewhat out of order, but they're going to get the same things at Bishop McGinnis in a year that we would get at Bishop here, right? And so you are going to get the same sequence, scope of events, scope of things that you learn by that as well. And so he is also using this as his textbook. And so it is the living word, which is the revelation of God's love. And you're more than welcome to follow that. I'll pass this around as well for people to look at.
We heard our teacher is cooler anyway.
I'm sorry?
We heard our teacher is cooler than Nelson.
Well, I don't want to get in trouble with the bishop, so.
Can parents join the class?
You're more than welcome to come up and do You're throwing
He's calling his wife out.
So we would love to have parents come up and visit, and I would love to take parents through or to allow you guys to sit in this stuff if you'd ever had a desire to do that. So because of the weirdness of our schedule, if you'll just let us know a day that you'd like to come up so that we know that we're where we're at or what we're doing with those days, I'm happy to do that. But yes, you are, please, we have an open door policy. So, yeah. But that's the fun part of it.
Right.
Right? Neela doesn't have a look at her face that's like, God, I'm excited about this.
While we're talking about Mr. Beach's class,
Yes.
when he's gone to DC, who's the sub for that class?
Yes, so I'm trying to think who that is now that they have a plan in place.
And I know Miss Bass is gone too.
Miss
so-
Bass and he are gone, and I think that Miss McCara is stepping in on those
Oh,
days
okay,
actually to do that
okay,
as well. So they put into place, something she's been wanting to do, and so
Right.
Ms. McCara, who is part of our corporate work study team, is wanting to do.
Okay, that's great. Miss
And that
Becketta.
is Ms. McCara, Vanessa McCara, who's a corporate work study team.
Next year, are those teachers moving up with the students?
So, not for the most part. So we have, there's a possibility that Ms. Trivet, depending on what class your student is in, may end up with that. So Ms. Trivet is right now teaching algebra and geometry. And next year what's likely to happen is that she'll teach algebra 1 and algebra 2. And then we'll have another teacher that comes in with geometry. It also depends on who we hire for that role and we're able to find. But that's a big one. And then right now, Miss Elliott will shift into an academic supports position, and so she'll be working with Miss Cheney next year and helping to support students. And so we'll be doing probably a lot of support with our sophomore teachers and with our sophomore students, so your students. And right now, that's what we have. Ms. Reynolds, so depending on what class your student is in with Spanish, Spanish will be focused on either kind of a heritage direction or a Spanish 1-2. So Spanish as well is another place that we will have a teacher that's probably coming in next year that will be focusing on the basics and the growing of Spanish versus Ms. Reynolds will be focusing on heritage Spanish and developing organic world language. Science, social studies, English.
So our kids are basically gonna get new teachers every single year?
Right, yes.
So they're breaking.
And there's always the possibility that you see someone again. My sophomore English teacher was my senior English teacher when I was in high school. But at this moment, that's your Miss Blakely, Miss Elliott will be she'll be in classrooms, but won't probably be the lead teacher in that situation. And then Ms. Trivet will be a person who could be a lead teacher. It depends on what class you have her with this year.
Did you say Spanish was moving up?
So we will hire another Spanish teacher, and so it will depend on what your student is in. So if they're in Spanish 1 this year as a non-heritage student, they're likely to get a new teacher next year.
How often will the grades be updated?
So-
Especially like with English, and I know it depends on the pace of the class, but how often will those grades be updated so that we can monitor our child's progress and, if they identify a problem, that we can address it instead of waiting till the last minute and then it's too late.
Sure. That's one of the reasons we send home progress reports every 2 weeks. And so those progress reports that go home, it starts over. So even though you haven't gotten the progress reports since the middle of the week.
So it won't be 3 weeks before grades updated.
It'll be, every 2-week time period we'll have the progress reports. But the Power School is available for you to be able to log in and to see real time of that as well.
And I have, and that's why I was asking, because it's been like weeks at a time,
Finals.
almost a month before grades updated, and
If you ever had that issue, please reach out to me. We
Okay.
attempt to have at least a couple of grades in per week at least, and then making sure that we're keeping updated with that. Some teachers get behind like anybody, but that's the goal is always to have enough grades in to know what our kids are doing.
And then on Power School too, I noticed like as grades get input, the dates are all scattered. Like, are they not input? Like, is it not updated like based on the last grade that was put in? Or
I will.
like I just don't know how to use it.
Do they get scattered like?
Sometimes
sequence gets-
December grades are like down at the bottom, and then you find like October grades at the top, and
That's
they're just
weird.
all
I don't
scattered.
like that.
Okay, so
That
I
is
was
something
curious.
I will ask Mrs. Jokum about.
Okay.
Because she's our Power School guru, and I will.
Yes, I didn't know if it was like my own setting or my
I'll
own
make a note of that.
computer.
Just, would you mind making a note of that?
Yes.
I didn't.
Because in a
it should
perfect
be.
world,
Yeah.
it would be great to log in and know that the very top grade is their most recent grade, but
Or at least that it's in an order.
That's
or
the
something,
right.
right?
But,
That's,
like,
that's,
I'm-
that's what I've always assumed it was.
Yeah,
and so
mine is in order
Mine
too.
is-
yeah, so I don't know if mine.
Filter.
Okay, so maybe it's a
So,
setting within mine
it
or
might
something.
be, but Ms. Jokum would be happy to look at.
Okay, great.
Ms.
Thank
Jokum
you.
is here every day from 8:30 to 3, and so I'll have her give you a call.
Okay, thank you.
Is there an update on talking points?
So,
Everyone needs that.
where we're leaning to at the moment, that Talking Points is providing us as we're working through this, is there was an update on the app that on your iPhone or on your Android that might have been updated, and that if you might, our next thing that we were going to say out this evening was, would you mind double checking to see that it's been updated or not? Because we're not getting across the board with everything, and they're not finding other issues up in their world at the moment with that they're aware of, and so they're trying to dig into that right now and figure out what's going on with that. Yes.
Delete your app and download it again.
Yeah, that's what me and Angelina did in our work.
So
Just delete the
Delete
app
it,
and then
reload it.
But his son was
So-
still
It doesn't-
active and
mine doesn't
still
give me
having problems.
So I'm a receive. I receive it as well. Like every time I send something out, like I receive that on mine, and so I tried to like look at it and see what from my end of it if there's. It has continued to work for me, but I also know we have now a group of parents that is probably it looks like 15 to 20 people that it's not working for properly all the time, and so it is. This show can spend about 3 hours trying to figure that out today on the tech support line with them, doing different things, and so it is high up on our list to try to figure out.
So just
Yeah.
to make
And
sure
we paid them
I'm
to have the service, obviously, and so they're trying to figure it out too.
so like when you open your sons up, like you see the grades in dated order, like from
I always go on my computer. and I look at it on my
Gotcha.
phone, so-
Yeah, so there is a meeting on
Updated.
Thursday as well. So, and you are more than welcome to, anyone's welcome to join. That is a town hall meeting. We have a guest speaker, his name is Tracy McDaniel. Tracy McDaniel is the KIPP OKC Executive Director. I know that the KIPP parents probably know that, without a doubt, but those of you that are not KIPP parents might not know that. So Mr. McDaniel was the initial founding principal for the KIPP school here in Oklahoma City, and has grown the school out and has now turned into the boss, basically, for the two schools that are there. And so we went to Mr. McDaniel in the midst of late December, as we were discussing some of the issues that were going on, and asked for him to take a look at things and to read curriculum and to give us insight and to look at things and to really dig into that, but also to give us a bigger perspective as well. And the bigger perspective is that we're in year one of startup mode, and KIPP has been around now for, I think that they are in their 9th year here in Oklahoma City, and we're just kind of thinking from a starting up perspective and the growth perspective, and where are we going? And so keeping our eyes on the prize and making sure that we are getting our kids to and through college, which is also a KIPP statement, and something that we want to make sure that we are continuing to provide, but also it's an opportunity for you to talk to him, and for him to provide some insight on that and to ask questions. He's a big supporter of ours of the school overall. KIPP does not have a high school in our community, and Mr. McDaniel has talked very directly about the fact that it is an important step for us to continue to be a realistic option for them to send KIPP students here to be able to graduate there, as they send students to a multitude of schools throughout the city, but that they can be successful here. And so he wants to come and talk to not only KIPP parents, but also to all of our parents, because there are bruises and bumps of growing, and then there are also things that when you think about holding your school to high expectations from a parent perspective, that you should absolutely feel comfortable doing it every day, and he wants to talk about both sides of that. So, yes, ma'am.
I did the update and it did work.
It works now. Okay, great. I can't send out a talking points telling people to do that. So I'm going to have to go through and make phone calls. Yes.
Does anyone have any questions about the English curriculum? If you look at it, I have to head out, but I do want to be available for questions before I can. You guys have any?
Not about the curriculum, but the extra credit that they did. When will you post that?
So if they've already given it to me, I have already posted it. It's going to be available until the end of the unit, so that's probably going to be close to the end of January, so I'll post it as soon as I get it.
Okay, because we my daughter turned hers in before the break and it's still not in.
So if you have questions, let me know. I've kept all of them, so we can go back and look just in case there was a discrepancy, because I figured bonus, I'm going to try to pinch it, so I have all of them.
Okay.
But she can come finally get them. I'm more than happy to go through that again.
Mm-hmm. Did you get yours?
I will, unless we have more questions, pause our meetings there tonight. I'm here to talk and discuss things as we go through. And I think that, so we thought about printing out this, honestly, for the entire year. And the reality is that I would need a new forest to start that off, right? And so what I actually would want to propose to you is that we can do this again. I'd love to be able to do this again maybe in the middle of the semester as we end the third quarter and go into the fourth and talk about what's going on there. And maybe we can have these kinds of meetings just as an ongoing perspective, an ongoing basis.
Is that going to be available for, like you said, where if you scan it, we can?
I'd be happy to scan it into, I imagine, I would imagine that if I scan this right now, it would not send out in a single email, but I would be happy to send out anything that people have questions about, or I would ask it to post.
Just like the highlights of it.
Yes.
I mean, I don't need it.
Absolutely.
Is every report card gonna be where we have to come in and pick it up?
So next report card, January 23rd is report card pickup. That day will be based on students that we really need to have individual conversations with, based on first semester troubles, honestly. And so we will have report cards that will go home with parents that day. If you are a student who has all A's or all B's, that's not to say we won't talk with you or meet with you. We just may not do it on that day of the 23rd. We may set a time up at a different time. But on the 23rd, we're going to be talking about summer school and spring night school to make sure that we're getting credits and all the fun that goes with those kinds of things. So we will be calling and setting up those. But we will always send home and have available. If you're not able to make it on those Wednesdays nights, we will always send them home post that. So.
It's just.
You want to get some questions at me?
Whatever. Do you know, do you have a dress code for their service day? Are they going to come in regular uniform?
Yes, so no, we're not coming in regular uniform. They're going to be coming, I believe that Miss Bass and Miss Porter, who are leading the way on this one, have decided the students will be coming in jeans and their Cristo Rey shirt that day. Of course, it may be 5 degrees that day, and so we'll obviously make adjustments as the, or it may be 95 degrees. You guys know Oklahoma. So we'll make adjustments as we get a little bit closer, but right now the plan is blue jeans and the t-shirt or undershirt. I sent out to all the emails that I have as well that there's another round of coats, jackets that you can order. So if you don't have one and you want one, the due date is this Friday. And so it's $43.50. That is what we get it for. We're not making a cent off of it. And so you're welcome to do that as well. And that's due to, they're going to go to Miss Lovelace or Miss Esparza, who's our new Miss Lovelace on the first floor. And Miss Lovelace moves to the second floor. One of the two of them will take the money and we'll put it in order. And if you don't want a jacket, that's fine too. So it's just optional.
I'm complaining if you don't know the word.
Also, if you would like one of those jackets, you may have one as well. So it can be not just students, but yourself. And we are working with our goal is that by spring break that we will have a
Which is weird because I'm able to get messages
t-shirt, polos, bags,
from Facebook.
that kind of thing that parents can order things for themselves. For students, that will be online. Loves has a vendor that they work with. It's an online vendor that we provide them their information and we go with. And Loves is, as you all know, a major partner for us. And Mr. Tilton, who is our basketball coach, and has been named our athletic director for this year. Is working with us to be able to support and do. So we are. He's going to be our guy. He's going to be able to take care of soccer and golf and tennis this spring.
No track.
Track is going to be individualized. We have students that are interested in doing it. I'm happy to talk about that as well. We're not currently planning, but I'm happy to open it up.
When did we find out about the spring sports?
So soccer, there's been a girls tryout that's already occurred, but we can open it up again. And then there is boys that we've been ongoing and working with. And so that really starts in March. Soccer, when it starts getting a little bit warmer is when is soccer. Tennis and golf really are late spring because they're all outdoors. And
What did you go up under?
It's getting kids back out into
What do we
the
go up under
outdoors.
to get to that air thing?
We all know that again, that can be next week when it's warm, or that can be in March when it's warm. But most of those things will have to, I think soccer starts a little bit earlier, a couple of weeks earlier than spring break, but golf and tennis will be post spring break.
General,
So,
and then there should be airdrop in there.
I sneezed earlier.
Airdrop. Yeah, so then you can stick everyone, and then if I find, or a contacts, if I'm in the
Okay.
contacts, I don't know if I'm.
Thank you all for coming out this evening. I hope to see you on Thursday, and